The crack of lightning split the night sky as Olivia Porter clutched her soaked shawl tighter around her trembling shoulders, cursing the moment she'd decided to flee from the man who had paid for her passage west. The Montana Territory of 1878 showed no mercy to a woman alone, especially one running blindly through an unforgiving spring storm. Wind howled through the pines as Olivia stumbled forward, her sodden skirts heavy with rain and mud. Each step was a battle against the elements that seemed determined to drive her back to the small cabin she'd escaped from just hours earlier. But return was impossible now. She'd rather die in this storm than marry Jasper Thornton, a man whose cruel eyes and quick fists had revealed his true nature within moments of her arrival. "I paid good money for you," he'd sneered, waving the marriage contract in her face. $50 and the cost of your train ticket from Boston. You're mine now, proper and legal." She'd nodded meekly, playing the obedient bride-to-be while silently planning her escape. The wedding was set for tomorrow, which had given her precious little time. When Jasper had finally fallen into a drunken stupor after dinner, Olivia had grabbed what few possessions she could carry and slipped out the back door. Now, hours later, she was hopelessly lost in unfamiliar territory, with the storm growing more violent by the minute. Her thin boots, appropriate for Boston parlors but woefully inadequate for the Montana wilderness, squelched with each painful step. The darkness was near complete, broken only by the occasional flash of lightning that illuminated the rugged landscape in stark, terrifying detail. A particularly strong gust of wind knocked her sideways, sending her tumbling down a muddy embankment. Olivia cried out as she landed hard at the bottom, pain shooting through her ankle. Tears mixed with the rain on her face as she struggled to stand, only to collapse again with a whimper. Foolish, foolish woman, she chided herself. What had she been thinking? That she could somehow find her way to the nearest town. Helena, wasn't it? On foot in the dark, in the middle of a tempest, without money, without friends, without any knowledge of the territory. The truth was, she hadn't been thinking beyond escape. The letters from Jasper had painted such a different picture: a prosperous ranch, a respectable man seeking a companion to share his life. The reality had been a ramshackle cabin, barely standing, and a man whose breath reeked of whiskey before noon. Another flash of lightning revealed something Olivia hadn't noticed before: a small outcropping of rock that might offer some shelter. Gritting her teeth against the pain, she dragged herself toward it, inch by agonizing inch. Meanwhile, 15 miles away at the Circle Q Ranch, Kade Quinn frowned at the worsening weather beyond his window. His foreman, Thomas, had just delivered concerning news. "You're certain it was Thornton's place they delivered her to?" Kade asked, his jaw tightening. Thomas nodded grimly. "Stagecoach driver confirmed it, said she was a real lady, educated, refined, Eastern by her accent, mail-order bride for Thornton," Kade swore under his breath. Everyone within 50 miles knew Jasper Thornton's reputation. The man was violent, unpredictable, and worse when drinking, which was most of the time. No decent woman would agree to marry him if she knew the truth. "Poor woman probably has no idea what she's gotten herself into," Kade muttered, running a hand through his dark hair. "That ain't all," Thomas continued, shifting uncomfortably. "I was talking to Sam over at the Mercantile. He rode past Thornton's place about 3 hours ago. Said he saw someone running from the property, looked like a woman in a blue dress, heading east, straight into the storm." Kade was already reaching for his coat before Thomas finished speaking. "Saddle Eclipse, I'm going after her. Boss, that storm's getting worse by the minute." "You can't be thinking, I'm not asking for your opinion, Thomas." Kade's voice was quiet but brooked no argument. "That woman is alone out there, running from Thornton in the worst storm we've had this spring. I won't sit here warm and dry while she freezes to death." Within minutes, Kade was mounted on Eclipse, his most sure-footed stallion. The black horse snorted nervously at the thunder but stood steady as Kade secured his oilskin coat and checked his saddlebags. He'd packed bandages, whiskey for medicinal purposes, jerky, a spare blanket, and his Colt revolver. If Thornton was pursuing his runaway bride, Kade wanted to be prepared. "I'll be back," he told Thomas, who stood in the doorway of the barn looking concerned. If I'm not back by morning, get Sheriff Wilson and come looking." With that, he urged Eclipse forward into the driving rain, heading east toward Thornton's property. The storm had obliterated any tracks, but Kade knew this land better than most. If the woman had fled east, there were only a few routes she could have taken. The rain pelted his face like tiny needles as he rode, scanning the ground for any sign of passage. Eclipse moved cautiously through the darkness, his ears flicking back and forth. It was slow going, but Kade pressed on, a sense of urgency driving him forward. An hour into his search, a lightning flash revealed something pale among the dark underbrush. A scrap of fabric caught on a thorny branch. Kade dismounted, examining it by the light of his covered lantern. Blue cotton, torn and mudded, it matched Thomas's description of the woman's dress. "Good boy," he murmured to Eclipse, swinging back into the saddle. "We're on her trail now." He continued eastward, following what faint signs he could find. A broken branch here, a footprint in particularly deep mud there. The woman was moving erratically, clearly unfamiliar with the territory. And based on the deepening impressions of her footprints, she was tiring quickly. The next flash of lightning showed Kade something that made his blood run cold. A steep embankment with fresh signs of a fall, and at the bottom, a small huddled shape that wasn't moving. "Hello," he called out, dismounting quickly and securing Eclipse to a nearby tree. "Madam, can you hear me?" The only response was the howling wind. Kade made his way carefully down the slippery slope, his heart pounding. As he drew closer, he could make out a woman's form, curled beneath a small rock overhang. Her blue dress was nearly black with mud and water, and her face was hidden by a tangle of wet auburn hair. "Madam," he said more softly, approaching slowly to avoid startling her. "I'm here to help." Olivia jerked awake at the deep voice, pressing herself further against the rock in terror. Was it Jasper? Had he found her already? "Stay back," she warned, her voice hoarse from crying. "I'm not going back there. I'm not taking you back to Thornton," the man said, crouching a few feet away. Lightning illuminated his features momentarily, a strong jaw darkened with stubble, eyes that seemed kind even in the harsh light. "My name is Kade Quinn. I own the Circle Q Ranch about 15 miles west of here." Olivia hesitated, trying to determine if this stranger represented another danger. "How did you find me? Why are you here?" "Word travels fast in these parts," Kade explained, keeping his distance. "I heard Thornton had a bride delivered, and then that someone had fled his property. I came looking because no one should be out in this storm, especially not someone unfamiliar with this territory." Another flash of lightning, and Olivia saw that his clothes were as soaked as hers, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. He'd come out in this terrible weather. For her. "A stranger, I'm Olivia Porter," she said finally, her teeth chattering. "From Boston." "You're freezing, Miss Porter. I have a dry blanket in my saddlebags and a horse strong enough to carry us both to safety. Will you trust me?" Olivia weighed her options, which were few. Stay here and likely die of exposure, or trust this man who had ridden through the storm to find her. "My ankle," she admitted. "I think it may be sprained. I can't walk." Kade nodded. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward her injured leg. At her cautious nod, he gently examined her ankle, his touch professional and respectful. "Swollen, but I don't think it's broken. Still, you shouldn't put weight on it." He stood and offered his hand. "I'm going to carry you up to my horse if that's all right." Olivia hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. It was warm despite the cold rain, strong and calloused from work. With surprising gentleness, Kade lifted her, cradling her against his chest as he navigated the slippery slope. Eclipse waited patiently, unfazed by the storm. Kade retrieved the promised blanket, wrapping it around Olivia's shoulders before helping her onto the saddle. "Hold on," he instructed, mounting behind her and wrapping one arm securely around her waist. "It's going to be a long ride, but I'll get you somewhere safe." "Not back to Jasper's," Olivia said, a note of panic in her voice. "Never," Kade promised, his breath warm against her ear. "You have my word." With that, they set off into the storm, Eclipse picking his way carefully through the treacherous terrain. Olivia found herself leaning back against Kade's solid chest, drawing strength from his unwavering presence. "Why did you come looking for me?" she asked after they had ridden in silence for some time. You don't know me. Kade was quiet for a moment. My mother was a mail-order bride, he finally said. She came west to marry a man she'd only exchanged letters with. He wasn't what he claimed to be, but she had nowhere else to go. No one helped her. His voice hardened. I couldn't let that happen to someone else. What happened to your mother? Olivia asked softly. She endured for 20 years, died when I was 18. His words were clipped, and Olivia sensed there was more to the story than he was sharing. I'm sorry, she said, meaning it. Kade didn't respond, but his arm tightened slightly around her waist, whether in acknowledgement or simply to keep her secure on the horse. Olivia couldn't tell. They rode through the night, the storm gradually weakening as dawn approached. Olivia drifted in and out of consciousness, exhaustion and the rhythmic movement of the horse lulling her despite her discomfort. Each time she woke, she found herself still held securely in Kade's strong grip, his posture never wavering despite what must have been hours of difficult riding. As the first pale light of dawn broke through the clouds, Olivia saw buildings in the distance, a large ranch house with several outbuildings and a barn. Circle Q, Kade explained, noticing her interest. My home. It's beautiful, Olivia murmured, taking in the well-maintained structures. Even in the gray morning light, she could see that this was a prosperous operation, nothing like Jasper's dilapidated property. As they approached, a middle-aged woman emerged from the main house, her expression shifting from worry to relief. Mr. Quinn, thank the Lord you're back. She called, hurrying toward them as Kade guided Eclipse to the hitching post. Mrs. Abernathy, Kade greeted her, dismounting smoothly before helping Olivia down. This is Miss Porter. She needs dry clothes, a hot meal, and rest, and her ankle needs tending. Mrs. Abernathy's eyes widened slightly at the sight of Olivia's bedraggled condition, but she recovered quickly. Of course, let's get you inside, dear. Between Kade and Mrs. Abernathy, Olivia made it into the house, where she was immediately ushered to a guest room. Mrs. Abernathy helped her out of her ruined clothes and into a warm nightgown, then bandaged her swollen ankle with practiced efficiency. Mr. Quinn's mother left behind a few dresses that might fit you, the housekeeper explained as she worked. I'll have them aired out and ready for when you've rested. Thank you, Olivia said, overwhelmed by the kindness. I don't know how I'll ever repay none of that talk, Mrs. Abernathy interrupted gently. Mr. Quinn wouldn't hear of it anyway. Now, let me bring you some hot broth and tea, then you need to sleep. Too exhausted to argue, Olivia accepted the offered food gratefully, then sank into the clean, soft bed. Despite the strange surroundings, she fell asleep almost immediately, her last thought of the man who had ridden through a storm to save her. Kade stood at the window of his study, watching as the clouds dispersed and sunlight began to dry the rain-soaked landscape. Behind him, Thomas cleared his throat. Thornton's going to come looking for her, the foreman said without preamble. He paid good money for that bride. Kade's jaw tightened. She's not property to be bought and sold. I know that, and you know that, but Thornton won't see it that way. And technically, there's a contract signed under false pretenses, Kade countered, turning to face Thomas. She thought she was coming to marry a decent man with a prosperous ranch, not a violent drunk living in squalor. Thomas sighed. I'm not disagreeing with you, boss. Just saying we should be prepared. Thornton's not known for his reasonable nature. Post extra men on watch, Kade instructed. And send word to Sheriff Wilson. I want him aware of the situation. After Thomas left, Kade sank into his desk chair, fatigue finally catching up with him. He'd been riding all night, tense with worry until he'd found Olivia huddled beneath that rock outcropping. Even now, knowing she was safe in his guest room, he couldn't quite shake the image of her terrified face when he'd first approached her. What kind of hell had she been running from that made her fear a stranger's help in the middle of a deadly storm? He had his suspicions, based on Thornton's reputation, but the thought made his blood boil. A soft knock on the door interrupted his dark thoughts. Mr. Quinn, Mrs. Abernathy entered with a tray. I've brought you coffee and something to eat. You need to rest too. Thank you, Mrs. Abernathy, he said, accepting the tray gratefully. How is Miss Porter? Sleeping soundly. The poor dear was exhausted. Her ankle is swollen but should heal well with rest. The housekeeper hesitated. She's a lady, Mr. Quinn, well-bred and educated. What was she doing with a man like Thornton? She was deceived, Kade replied, his voice hard. Like many women who come west as mail-order brides, Mrs. Abernathy's expression softened. Like your mother. Kade nodded once, sharply. Make sure she has everything she needs when she wakes, and prepare the blue guest room for extended use. Miss Porter will be staying with us until she's fully recovered and has decided what she wishes to do next. Of course. Mrs. Abernathy turned to leave, then paused. It's good what you did. Your mother would be proud. After she left, Kade stared into his coffee, memories surfacing that he usually kept tightly locked away. His mother, Elizabeth, arriving from Philadelphia with dreams of a new life, only to find herself married to a man who resented her education and refined ways. The gradual dimming of her spirit as each year passed. The way she'd protected Kade from the worst of his father's temper, often at her own expense. He'd been powerless to help her then. But he could help Olivia Porter now. Olivia woke to afternoon sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains. For a moment, she was disoriented. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back, fleeing from Jasper's cabin, getting lost in the storm, being rescued by Kade Quinn. She sat up slowly, testing her ankle. It was still tender but less swollen than before. On a chair nearby, she found several dresses laid out, along with undergarments, stockings, and even a pair of soft leather slippers. With some effort, Olivia managed to dress herself in a simple blue cotton dress that fit reasonably well, though it was a bit loose in the waist. She was just attempting to tame her unruly auburn hair when a knock sounded at the door. "Come in," she called. Mrs. Abernathy entered with a tray. "Ah, you're up, and the dress fits well enough, I see. How are you feeling, Miss Porter?" "Much better, thank you," Olivia replied honestly. "My ankle is still sore, but the rest has helped." "Good, good. I've brought you some late lunch, and there's a comb and pins for your hair." The housekeeper set down the tray. "Mr. Quinn asked if you might join him for dinner this evening if you're feeling up to it." "Nothing formal, just a simple meal." "I'd like that," Olivia said. "I owe him my thanks at the very least." Mrs. Abernathy smiled. "He'll be pleased. Dinner is at 6 in the dining room. I'll come help you down the stairs beforehand." After the housekeeper left, Olivia ate the offered meal, a hearty beef stew with fresh bread, while gazing out the window at the Circle Q ranch. In daylight, she could see it was even more impressive than her first glimpse had suggested. Neat fences enclosed paddocks where horses grazed. Cowboys moved purposefully between outbuildings. A large garden stretched behind the main house, already showing spring plantings. Everything spoke of careful management and prosperity, a stark contrast to Jasper Thornton's decrepit cabin and overgrown fields. Olivia shivered, remembering the 12 terrifying hours she'd spent in that cabin. Jasper had seemed sober enough when she'd arrived, but as the day wore on, he'd consumed more and more whiskey, his behavior becoming increasingly erratic. When he'd grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise, leering that they should get to know each other proper before the wedding, Olivia had known she couldn't go through with the marriage, but where could she go now? She had almost no money, just the few dollars she'd managed to hide in her corset before fleeing. Her family in Boston had made it clear they couldn't support her any longer after her father's business failed. That's why she'd answered the advertisement for a bride in the first place. A knock at the door interrupted her troubled thoughts. "Miss Porter," it was Kade's deep voice. "May I come in?" "Yes, of course," she called, quickly smoothing her hair and dress. Kade entered, and Olivia was struck by the transformation. Gone was the rain-soaked rescuer of last night. In his place stood a tall, handsome man in clean trousers and a pressed shirt, his dark hair neatly combed. Only the shadow of fatigue around his eyes hinted at his overnight ordeal. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said, remaining near the door. "I wanted to check on you before I ride out to check the herd." "You're not disturbing me at all," Olivia assured him. "I was just—" She gestured vaguely toward the window. "Admiring your ranch, it's quite impressive." A small smile curved Kade's lips. "Thank you. It's been a labor of love for many years." "Mrs. Abernathy mentioned dinner this evening. I look forward to it." Kade nodded. "Good, we can discuss your options then." "Options?" Olivia repeated. For your future, he clarified. You're welcome to stay here until you're fully recovered and have decided what you want to do next. I can help you return to Boston if that's your wish, or perhaps find suitable employment in Helena if you prefer to remain in Montana. Olivia was stunned by his generosity. Mr. Quinn, I don't know what to say. You've already done so much. I've done what any decent person would do, he interrupted gently. And please call me Kade. Kade, she echoed, the name feeling right on her lips. Then you must call me Olivia. Something warm flickered in his hazel eyes. Olivia, then. He took a step toward the door. I should let you rest. We'll talk more at dinner. After he left, Olivia found herself touching the spot where he'd briefly laid his hand on hers when saying goodbye, a proper, respectable gesture, yet it had sent an unexpected warmth through her. Ridiculous, she chided herself. She barely knew the man, and after her disastrous experience with Jasper Thornton, she should be wary of all men in this territory. Yet there was something about Kade Quinn that inspired trust rather than fear. That evening with Mrs. Abernathy's help, Olivia made her way downstairs to the dining room. It was a comfortable space with a large oak table that could seat 12, though only 2 places were set at one end. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, taking the spring evening chill from the air. Kade rose when she entered, coming forward to assist her to her chair. You look well, he said, his eyes warming as they took in her appearance. Rest has brought color back to your cheeks. Thank you, Olivia replied, feeling a blush rise at his attention. I'm feeling much stronger. Dinner was simple but delicious: roast chicken, potatoes, early spring vegetables from the garden, and fresh bread. As they ate, Kade asked about her life in Boston, and Olivia found herself telling him about her father's import business and its failure, her mother's death years earlier, and the difficult decision to become a mail-order bride. It seemed the only option, she explained. My 2 married sisters couldn't take me in, and I had no skills for employment beyond basic teaching or becoming a governess, positions that are scarce in Boston and pay barely enough to survive. And Thornton's letters? Kade asked, his expression carefully neutral. Olivia sighed. They painted such a different picture than the reality. He wrote of a prosperous ranch, a comfortable home, a respectable life he wanted to share with an educated wife. She shook her head. I was naive to believe it all without verification. Not naive, Kade countered. You had no way of knowing. Men like Thornton are practiced deceivers. They fell silent as Mrs. Abernathy cleared the dinner plates and brought apple pie for dessert. What about you? Olivia asked after the housekeeper had gone. You mentioned your mother was a mail-order bride. How did you come to own such a successful ranch? A shadow crossed Kade's face. My father died when I was 22. The ranch was failing by then. He'd neglected it for years in favor of drinking and gambling. After my mother's death, he had little interest in anything productive. He took a sip of coffee before continuing. I used what little savings I had and took out loans to rebuild. It's taken 10 years of hard work, but the Circle Q is finally what it should have been all along. You've accomplished something remarkable, Olivia said softly. Kade met her eyes, and something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of shared experience with parental loss and difficult choices. Now, he said, breaking the moment, we should discuss your situation. Thornton will likely come looking for you. Olivia's stomach clenched. Do you think he'll find me here? Eventually, yes. It's a small community and word travels, but you're under my protection now and I won't let him near you. But the contract was obtained through deception, Kade finished firmly. Sheriff Wilson is a friend. He'll back us if Thornton tries to make legal trouble. Olivia wanted to believe him, but doubt nagged at her. What if he doesn't? What if I'm forced to return? Kade reached across the table, taking her hand in his. That won't happen, Olivia, I promise you. The conviction in his voice soothed her fears, at least temporarily. Thank you, she whispered. As for your longer-term options, he continued, you're welcome to stay here until you decide what you want to do. If you wish to return to Boston, I'll provide the train fare. If you'd prefer to stay in Montana, I have connections in Helena who could help you find suitable employment. You're very kind, Olivia said, overwhelmed by his generosity. Kade shook his head. It's not kindness, it's the right thing to do. He paused. There's also a third option. if you're interested. Mrs. Abernathy has been asking for help with the household for some time, and I need someone to manage the accounts and correspondence. Your education would make you well suited for both roles, if you'd consider staying on at Circle Q. Olivia blinked in surprise. You're offering me employment? Yes, with fair wages, your own room in the main house, and all meals provided. He looked at her steadily. No strings attached, Olivia. If you're uncomfortable with the idea, I understand completely. It was a generous offer, perhaps too generous. Why would you do this for me? She asked. You don't know me. Something flickered in Kade's eyes, vulnerability, perhaps. I know enough, he said quietly. I know you're brave enough to flee a dangerous situation alone, intelligent enough to survive a night in a storm, and honest enough to admit your fears. Those are qualities I value. Put that way, it was hard to argue. And the prospect of staying at Circle Q, with its orderly comfort and Kade's reassuring presence, was far more appealing than venturing to Helena alone or returning to Boston in disgrace. I would like to accept your offer, Olivia said finally. At least temporarily, until my ankle is fully healed and I've had more time to consider my options. Kade smiled, and the warmth of it reached his eyes. Good. We can discuss the specifics of your duties tomorrow, but for now you should continue to rest and recover. As they finished their dessert, the conversation turned to lighter topics. Books they had both read, Olivia's impressions of Montana compared to Boston, Kade's stories of ranch life. It was comfortable, almost intimate, and Olivia found herself laughing more than she had in months when Mrs. Abernathy returned to clear the dessert plates. Kade asked her to help Olivia back to her room. Thank you for a lovely dinner, Olivia said as she prepared to leave. The pleasure was mine, Kade replied, his gaze lingering on her face. Good night, Olivia. Good night, Kade. As she settled into bed that night, Olivia reflected on the strange turn her life had taken. 4 days ago, she had been on a stagecoach, filled with apprehension and hope about meeting her future husband. Now she was in the home of a man she'd just met, having fled from the man she'd traveled thousands of miles to marry. Yet despite the uncertainty, Olivia felt safer than she had in a very long time. There was something about Kade Quinn that inspired confidence, a steadiness, an integrity that seemed to radiate from him. And if she was being honest with herself, there was also an attraction that went beyond gratitude. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentleness of his strong hands, the quiet authority in his voice, all of it appealed to her in ways she hadn't expected. But it was foolish to dwell on such thoughts. Her situation was precarious, and Kade had offered employment, not courtship. The last thing she needed was to develop feelings for another Montana rancher she barely knew. With that stern admonition to herself, Olivia closed her eyes, determined to focus on recovery and practical plans for her future. The next morning brought sunshine and a notable improvement in Olivia's ankle. After a hearty breakfast delivered by Mrs. Abernathy, she was able to dress herself in another of the borrowed dresses, a pretty green calico that complemented her auburn hair. Using a cane Mrs. Abernathy had provided, Olivia made her way carefully downstairs, determined to begin earning her keep. She found the housekeeper in the kitchen, kneading bread dough. Miss Porter, you shouldn't be up and about already, Mrs. Abernathy scolded, though her eyes were kind. I can't stay in bed all day, Olivia replied with a smile. Mr. Quinn mentioned that I might help with household duties and correspondence. I'd like to start today, if possible. Mrs. Abernathy wiped her hands on her apron. Well, if you're determined, there's mending that needs doing. You can sit in the parlor where it's comfortable, and I'll bring you what needs fixing. Soon Olivia was settled by a sunny window, a basket of men's shirts and socks beside her. As she worked, she could see the activity of the ranch through the window, cowboys riding out to check cattle, workers repairing a fence damaged in the storm, Kade himself moving between the barn and the bunkhouse, giving instructions. Even at a distance, his commanding presence was unmistakable. The men clearly respected him, stopping their work to listen when he approached, nodding at his directions. Yet there was none of the fear she'd seen in the faces of the few workers at Jasper Thornton's property. Mid-morning, Mrs. Abernathy brought coffee and fresh baked cookies. Mr. Quinn will be in for lunch around noon, she mentioned casually. He asked if you'd join him in his study afterward to discuss the bookkeeping. Of course, Olivia agreed, trying to ignore the small flutter of anticipation in her stomach. At precisely noon, Kade entered the house, removing his hat and hanging it on the rack by the door. His face brightened when he saw Olivia in the parlor. "You're up," he said, coming to stand in the doorway. "How's the ankle?" "Much better today," she replied. "Mrs. Abernathy has been keeping me busy with mending." Kade glanced at the nearly empty basket beside her. "I see that, but don't overdo it. Recovery takes time." After a simple lunch of sandwiches and soup, served in the dining room, Kade led Olivia to his study, a comfortable room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a large desk covered in papers. "I'm afraid I've let things get behind," he admitted, gesturing to the stacks of documents. "Between calving season and the spring storms, I haven't had time for proper record keeping." Olivia examined the ledgers and correspondence with a practiced eye. Her father had taught her bookkeeping from a young age, believing all his children should understand business matters. "This is quite manageable," she assured him. "I can have it organized within a few days." Kade looked relieved. "That would be a tremendous help. I'm adequate with figures, but I prefer to be out with the cattle and horses." They spent the next hour going over the ranch's accounts, with Kade explaining the various income sources and expenses. Olivia was impressed by the operation's scope and profitability. "You've built something remarkable here," she commented as they finished. "We have good years and bad," Kade said modestly. "But yes, the ranch is doing well now. It wasn't always so." Their conversation was interrupted by a loud commotion outside, shouting voices and the sound of horses approaching at speed. Kade moved quickly to the window, his expression hardening. "Stay here," he instructed, heading for the door. "What is it?" Olivia asked, alarmed by the sudden change in his demeanor. "Thornton," he said grimly, "with 3 men." Fear coursed through Olivia. "He's come for me." "He can try," Kade replied, his voice cold, "but he won't succeed." He hesitated at the door. "Stay in the house, Olivia, no matter what you hear." With that, he was gone, the door closing firmly behind him. Olivia stood frozen for a moment, then moved to the window, unable to resist looking out despite Kade's instruction. From this angle, she could see the front of the house, where Jasper Thornton and 3 rough-looking men sat on horseback, facing Kade and several Circle Q cowboys who had quickly gathered. Even at a distance, Jasper's rage was evident in his posture, leaning forward in his saddle, jabbing his finger toward the house. Kade stood his ground, arms crossed, his stance unyielding. Though Olivia couldn't hear the words exchanged, the confrontation was clearly heated. Mrs. Abernathy appeared at the study door, her face tight with worry. "Come away from the window, Miss Porter. No good comes from watching trouble." "What will happen?" Olivia asked, allowing herself to be led to a chair. "Mr. Quinn can handle himself," the housekeeper assured her. "And the boys won't let those ruffians cause harm." Still, Mrs. Abernathy's hands twisted nervously in her apron, betraying her concern. The minutes crawled by as they waited in tense silence. Then came the sound of horses galloping away, followed by the front door opening and closing. Kade appeared in the study doorway, his expression grim but composed. "Is he gone?" Olivia asked, rising from her chair. "For now," Kade confirmed. "But he'll be back, likely with more men. He's convinced himself you're his property because he paid for your passage." "What did he say?" Olivia pressed. Kade's jaw tightened. "Nothing worth repeating. Threats, mostly, claims that I stole what was rightfully his." Olivia felt sick. "This is my fault. I've brought trouble to your door." "No," Kade interrupted firmly. "The trouble is Thornton's making, not yours. You have every right to refuse a marriage based on lies, especially to a man like him." Mrs. Abernathy cleared her throat. "I'll make some fresh coffee," she said, tactfully leaving them alone. When she had gone, Kade came to sit beside Olivia. "I've sent Thomas to fetch Sheriff Wilson. Once he's here, we can file a formal complaint against Thornton for harassment." "Will that stop him?" Olivia asked doubtfully. Kade sighed. "Honestly, probably not immediately. Thornton's not known for respecting the law. But it will put him on notice, and if he persists, the sheriff can arrest him." He hesitated, then took Olivia's hand in his. I meant what I said yesterday. You're under my protection now. I won't let him take you. The fierce determination in his voice was both reassuring and stirring. Olivia found herself squeezing his hand in return, drawing strength from his unwavering support. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know why you're doing all this for me, but I'm grateful." Something shifted in Kade's expression, a softening around the eyes, a hint of vulnerability that made him look younger. "Perhaps someday I'll explain it properly," he said. "For now, just know that I consider it a privilege, not a burden." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Then Kade gently released her hand and stood. "I should check on the men," he said, his voice resuming its normal businesslike tone. "We'll increase patrols around the property tonight just as a precaution. Stay in the house and let Mrs. Abernathy know if you need anything." After he left, Olivia remained seated, her hand still warm from his touch. Despite the threat Jasper Thornton presented, she couldn't help feeling that something important had shifted between her and Kade, something that went beyond gratitude and obligation. Sheriff Wilson arrived 2 hours later, a weathered man in his 50s with a no-nonsense manner and keen eyes that missed little. He interviewed Olivia thoroughly about her arrangement with Jasper, her reasons for fleeing, and the events of the past 2 days. "Thornton does have a contract," he said when they had finished, "but it was clearly obtained under false pretenses. You have the right to refuse marriage under such circumstances." "So he has no legal claim to me?" Olivia asked, needing the confirmation. "No legal claim," the sheriff affirmed. "That said, he's not a man who respects legal niceties. He's been in my jail 3 times for drunken brawling and once for shooting a neighbor's cow he claimed wandered onto his property." He turned to Kade. "I'll have a word with him, make it clear that harassing Miss Porter will lead to charges. But Quinn, you should be prepared for trouble. Thornton's not one to let go easily, especially when his pride is wounded." "We'll be ready," Kade assured him. After the sheriff departed, the atmosphere at the ranch remained tense. Kade doubled the night watch and made sure all the hands were armed. Olivia hated being the cause of such disruption, but was touched by how the ranch hands, to a man, seemed determined to protect her. "Don't you fret, Miss Porter," said one weathered cowboy when he brought in firewood. "Ain't a man here that would let that skunk Thornton anywhere near you." Days passed with no further sign of Jasper. Olivia's ankle healed rapidly, and she settled into a routine helping Mrs. Abernathy with household tasks in the mornings, working on the ranch accounts in Kade's study in the afternoons. In the evenings, she and Kade would often sit in the parlor, sometimes talking, sometimes reading companionably by the fire. She learned more about him during these quiet times, how he had spent 2 years working cattle drive to earn money to invest in the failing ranch after his father's death. His dreams for expanding Circle Q-Tick's horse breeding program. His love of literature that seemed at odds with his rugged exterior. In turn, she told him about her life in Boston, her passion for teaching that had been interrupted by her family's financial troubles, her hopes for someday having a home and family of her own. "Why did you never marry?" she asked one evening as they sat before the fire, a week after her arrival at Circle Q. Surely there were eligible women in Helena. Kade was silent for a moment, staring into the flames. "I came close once," he admitted. 4 years ago, Rebecca was the daughter of a banker in Helena. Beautiful, accomplished, from a good family. "What happened?" Olivia asked gently. "She visited the ranch," he said with a wry smile. "Found it too remote, too rustic for her tastes. Said she couldn't imagine being so far from town, from society." He shrugged. "She wasn't wrong to know her own mind, but it made me realize I needed someone who could love this land as I do, who would see the beauty in this life, not just the hardships." His gaze shifted from the fire to Olivia's face, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "What about you?" "Were there no suitors in Boston?" Olivia looked down at her hands. "A few, but my father's business was already failing, and once word spread of our financial difficulties, the suitors disappeared quickly enough." "Fools," Kade said quietly. She glanced up, startled by the intensity in his voice. "Any man worth his salt would value you for more than your father's bank account," he continued. "Your intelligence, Your courage, your kind heart, those are worth more than any dowry. Warmth bloomed in Olivia's chest at his words. No man had ever spoken to her with such genuine appreciation. Even her brief courtships in Boston had centered around social standing and financial prospects, never on her as a person. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means a great deal coming from you." Kade held her gaze for a long moment, then set aside his book and stood. "It's getting late. We should both get some rest." He helped her to her feet, his hands lingering on hers perhaps a moment longer than necessary. "Good night, Olivia." "Good night, Kade." As she climbed the stairs to her room, Olivia acknowledged what she had been trying to deny for days. She was falling in love with Kade Quinn. His strength and kindness, his integrity and intelligence, his respect for her as an equal, all of it had wound its way into her heart when she least expected it. But did he feel the same? Sometimes she caught him looking at her with an expression that made her heart race. Other times, he maintained a careful distance, as if reminding himself that she was his employee, not a potential wife. The next morning dawned clear and warm, the first truly spring-like day since Olivia's arrival. After breakfast, Kade suggested they ride out to see the new calves in the east pasture. "If your ankle is up to it," he added, "we can take the buggy if riding would be too uncomfortable." "I'd love to ride," Olivia assured him. She had been cooped up in the house for over a week and was eager to see more of the ranch. Mrs. Abernathy helped her into a riding habit, another garment left behind by Kade's mother, and soon Olivia was mounting a gentle mare named Daisy, with Kade's assistance. "She's the steadiest horse we have," he told her, adjusting the stirrups to fit Olivia's height. "She'll take good care of you." They rode out under a bright blue sky, Kade pointing out various features of the ranch as they went: the creek that provided water for the cattle, the meadow where he planned to build a new barn, the distant mountains that marked the edge of his property. "It's beautiful," Olivia said, taking in the rolling grassland dotted with spring wildflowers. "I understand now why you love it so much," Kade smiled, pleased by her appreciation. "It looks its best this time of year, before the summer heat turns everything brown." They reached the east pasture, where dozens of cows grazed with their new calves. Kade led Olivia to a shady spot beneath a large cottonwood tree where they dismounted to watch the animals. "We'll have a good year," he observed, satisfaction evident in his voice. "Healthy calves, strong mothers." Olivia watched a wobbly-legged calf frolic around its patient mother. "It's wonderful to see new life." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, enjoying the peaceful scene and the pleasant breeze. Then Kade turned to her, his expression suddenly serious. "Olivia, there's something I need to—" His words were cut off by the distant sound of gunfire. Kade was on his feet instantly, his hand going to the revolver at his hip. "Get on your horse," he ordered, his voice tense. "Now, what is it?" Olivia asked, scrambling to her feet. Gunshots from the direction of the ranch house. Kade was already helping her mount Daisy. "Stay close to me, and if I tell you to run, you ride hard for the line shack to the north. There's a trail right there." He pointed to a barely visible path leading into a stand of trees. Fear clutched at Olivia's heart as she settled into the saddle. More shots rang out, followed by shouts that carried on the wind. Kade swung onto Eclipse and led them at a fast trot back toward the main buildings, staying under the cover of trees when possible. As they crested a small rise, they could see the ranch yard below, and the scene made Olivia's blood run cold. Jasper Thornton and at least 6 men were engaged in a firefight with the Circle Q hands. 2 bodies already lay motionless in the dust, though from this distance, Olivia couldn't tell whose men they were. "Dear God," she whispered. Kade's face was grim as he assessed the situation. "They must have waited until they saw us ride out, thinking the ranch would be less defended." He turned to Olivia. "Change of plan, you need to get to Helena. The trail behind us leads to the main road if you follow it east. It's about 10 miles. Find Sheriff Wilson and bring help." "What about you?" Olivia asked, panic rising in her throat. "I need to help my men." His eyes met hers, intense and determined. "Olivia, he stopped, shook his head. "There's no time. Please go now while you can still get away unnoticed." "I can't leave you," she protested. "You must," Kade insisted. My men are fighting because of me because I chose to protect you. I won't let their sacrifice be in vain. The best thing you can do is get help." The logic was undeniable, but it tore at Olivia's heart to leave him riding into danger. On impulse, she leaned over and pressed her lips to his, a brief, desperate kiss. "Be careful," she whispered as she pulled away. "Please." Something fierce and tender flashed in Kade's eyes. "Go," he said hoarsely. "I'll find you when this is over." With one last anguished look, Olivia turned Daisy and urged her onto the trail leading east, away from the gunfire and the man she had come to love. Kade watched until Olivia disappeared into the trees, then turned back to the scene below. The gunfire had intensified, with Thornton's men pushing closer to the main house. He could make out Thomas directing the defense from the cover of the barn, and several of his hands using the corral fence as a barricade. Drawing his revolver, Kade guided Eclipse down the slope, keeping to the cover of trees until he was within range. Then, with a silent prayer, he broke cover and galloped toward his men, firing at Thornton's group as he approached. The surprise of his arrival from an unexpected direction created momentary confusion among the attackers. Two of Thornton's men turned to face this new threat, giving the Circle Q hands an opportunity to advance. Kade reached the relative safety of the barn, dismounting quickly and sending Eclipse to the corral with a sharp command. Thomas was there, a bloody bandage wrapped around his arm. "Quinn." "Thank God," the foreman exclaimed. "They came out of nowhere, at least 8 of them. We've lost Jenkins and possibly Williams. He was hit bad." "Where's Thornton?" Kade demanded, reloading his revolver. Thomas jerked his head toward the bunkhouse. "Hold up there with 3 of his men. The others are scattered around the yard. They were trying to get to the main house, but we've kept them pinned down so far." "Is Mrs. Abernathy safe?" "In the root cellar with her shotgun," Thomas confirmed. "First place she went when the shooting started." Kade nodded, relieved. "I sent Miss Porter to Helena for help. We need to hold them off until the sheriff arrives." A bullet splintered the wood beside Kade's head, forcing him and Thomas to duck lower. "Any idea what set Thornton off?" Kade asked as he returned fire. Thomas spat into the dirt. "Sheriff Wilson delivered your complaint yesterday. Must have pushed Thornton over the edge." For the next hour, the battle continued, with neither side gaining a clear advantage. Kade moved between positions, encouraging his men and directing their defense. One more Circle Q hand was wounded, and they managed to hit at least 2 of Thornton's group. Then, during a lull in the shooting, Jasper's voice rang out across the yard. "Quinn, let's talk this out man to man." Kade exchanged glances with Thomas. "Could be a trap," the foreman warned. "Could be," Kade agreed. "But if there's a chance to end this without more bloodshed, I have to try." Cautiously, he moved to the edge of the barn. "I'm listening, Thornton." "Send out the woman and we'll leave peaceful like," Jasper called back. "That's all I want, what's rightfully mine." "She's not here," Kade replied, "and she's not yours, she never was." "Liar." Thornton's voice was slurred with what Kade suspected was whiskey as much as rage. "I paid good money for her. I've got the papers to prove it." "Papers don't make a person property," Kade shouted back. "This isn't slave times, Thornton. She's a free woman who chose to leave you. Accept it and go home before you get yourself killed." The only response was a barrage of gunfire that forced Kade back into cover. "Worth a try," Thomas muttered. The stalemate continued as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ranch yard. Kade was beginning to worry about how they would fare in darkness when a welcome sound reached his ears. Horses approaching, many of them from the east. "That'll be the sheriff," he told Thomas with relief. Sure enough, moments later, Sheriff Wilson's voice boomed across the yard. "Thornton, this is Sheriff Wilson with 10 armed deputies. You're surrounded. Throw down your weapons and come out with your hands up." There was a tense silence, then the sound of angry voices arguing from the bunkhouse. Finally, one by one, guns were tossed out the door, followed by Jasper and his remaining men, hands raised. As the deputies moved in to make arrests, Kade scanned the approaching group for Olivia. He spotted her near the back, still mounted on Daisy, her face pale but resolute. Their eyes met across the yard, and relief washed over her features. Kade felt an answering surge of emotion so powerful it nearly brought him to his knees. While the deputies secured the prisoners, Kade made his way to Olivia, helping her dismount and then simply holding her, uncaring of who might see. "You're alive," she whispered against his chest, "when I heard all that gunfire." "I'm fine," he assured her, pulling back to look at her face. "Are you hurt? Was the ride to Helena too much?" She shook her head. "I met the sheriff's party on the road, about halfway there. They were already coming. Apparently one of your hands saw Thornton's group approaching and rode for help before the shooting started." Kade made a mental note to find out which of his men had shown such foresight and reward him handsomely. Sheriff Wilson approached them, his expression grim. "Quinn, we need to talk about what happened here. And Miss Porter, I'll need your statement as well." The next few hours were a blur of activity wounded men tended to, statements taken, the dead respectfully covered until they could be properly buried. Jasper and his men were taken away in chains, facing charges of murder for the two Circle Q hands who had died defending their ranch. It was near midnight when Kade finally had a moment alone with Olivia in the parlor of the main house, now eerily quiet after the day's chaos. "Will they go to prison?" Olivia asked, her hands cradling a cup of tea Mrs. Abernathy had insisted she drink. "Thornton certainly will," Kade confirmed. Murder during the commission of another crime in this case, an armed attack on private property, carries the harshest penalty. His men might receive lesser sentences depending on their involvement. Olivia was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. "2 men died because of me." "No," Kade said firmly, taking the tea from her hands and setting it aside so he could clasp her fingers in his. "They died because Jasper Thornton couldn't accept that a woman had the right to refuse him. That's not your fault." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. "When I came west, I never imagined causing such tragedy." "You didn't cause it," Kade insisted. "Thornton did, and he hesitated. I bear some responsibility too. I knew he might retaliate after the sheriff delivered our complaint, but I underestimated how quickly he'd move." His jaw tightened. "I should have been more prepared." "You couldn't have known," Olivia said softly. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of the day's events pressing heavily upon them. Then Kade spoke, his voice low and intense. "When I saw you ride away this morning, not knowing if I'd see you again, I realized something I should have admitted to myself days ago." He took a deep breath. "I'm in love with you, Olivia. I think I have been since the moment I found you in that storm." Olivia's heart leapt in her chest. "Kade, you don't have to say anything," he hurried on. "I know it's too soon, that you came here under terrible circumstances, that you're still finding your footing. I just needed you to know, after today, how I feel." Olivia reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "It's not too soon," she whispered. "Not when every day I've spent with you has shown me the kind of man you are: honorable, compassionate, brave." She drew a shaky breath. "I love you too, Kade. I think I began falling in love with you that night in the storm, when you risked your life to save a stranger." The wonder that spread across his face was beautiful to behold. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his head and kissed her, a gentle, reverent kiss that quickly deepened as Olivia responded, her arms going around his neck. When they finally parted, both breathless, Kade rested his forehead against hers. "I don't want to rush you," he said. "After everything you've been through, you deserve time to be sure of what you want." Olivia smiled, feeling truly at peace for the first time since leaving Boston. "I am sure," she told him. "I came west looking for a home, a place to belong. I found it not in Jasper Thornton's cabin, but here with you." Kade's answering smile was radiant. "Then stay," he said simply. "Not as my employee, but as my wife, if you'll have me." "Yes," Olivia replied without hesitation. "Yes, I'll have you." Their second kiss was a promise, a beginning, a healing after the day's violence. Later, as they sat on the porch watching the stars, Kade's arm around her shoulders, Olivia marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. From desperate mail-order bride to fugitive in a storm, to finding love with the man who had ridden through the night to save her. "What are you thinking?" Kade asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "That sometimes the wrong path can lead to the right destination," she replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. "If I hadn't agreed to marry Jasper, if I hadn't fled that night, if you hadn't come looking for me." If, Kade murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Too many chances for us to have missed each other. But we didn't, Olivia said softly. You found me. And I always will, he promised. 3 months later, on a perfect summer day, Olivia Porter became Olivia Quinn in a simple ceremony in the garden of the Circle Q Ranch. Sheriff Wilson gave her away, Mrs. Abernathy wept happy tears, and the ranch hands whooped and hollered as Kade kissed his bride for the first time. The reception lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing under lantern light. When most of the guests had departed, Kade led Olivia to a quiet spot beneath the stars. Happy, he asked, his arms encircling her waist. Completely, she assured him, resting her hands on his chest. Though I still can't believe how fortunate I am. To think I almost gave up that night in the storm. Kade's eyes grew serious. But you didn't. You fought to survive, to find a better life. That's one of the countless reasons I love you. Olivia smiled up at her husband, this strong, gentle man who had rescued her in more ways than one. And I love you, Kade Quinn, for riding through a storm to save a stranger, for seeing me as a person, not a possession, for giving me a home and a future I never dared dream of. Kade pulled her closer, his voice rough with emotion. You're the bravest woman I've ever known, Olivia Quinn. And I promise to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. I never could, she whispered before their lips met in a kiss that held all the promise of their future together, a future born from courage, compassion, and a fateful ride through a storm that had brought them home to each other. Years later, when their children asked how they met, Kade and Olivia would exchange a special smile before telling the story of a mail-order bride who fled through a storm, and the cowboy who found her and rode all night to save her, finding, in the process, the love that would define them both.